Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And I'm just going to let it all go today, Ginny. I'm letting it all go.
I feel like singing.
Oh, please don't.
Let it go.
How about we go to this music instead?
Okay.
Plus, I don't really want a copyright strike. And
Oh, fair. Okay.
know,
All right.
if you start singing lyrics to popular movies,
Yeah.
who knows, the YouTube algorithm
Fair.
might flag
Strike us down. Yeah.
Shame on you.
I did spend 5 days in Facebook jail, so I don't want to be put in YouTube jail too.
Well, what did you end up in Facebook jail for?
I told somebody I would kick their butt on a bicycle, and they took kick your butt, which was not the exact word. I used the A word. Yes. They took that as me harassing the person and like really kicking their butt. Like,
In fairness, you were harassing them, but not in the context.
correct.
Right?
Yeah. So it was not, context was lost, and they put me in jail for 5 days.
You know, I've seen more and more people getting put into Facebook jail over the last few months, and I'm
Like the robots are out of control, and there's zero context. Zero.
yeah. I mean, some of them probably belong in Facebook jail.
Fair. Yeah.
You know, and it's nice to get a few days break from them sometimes. But yes, it does seem like it's
Yeah.
The pendulum has swung a little bit too much in the other direction.
That is correct.
There.
Mhm.
But that's what happens when you try to use technology as a sledgehammer to solve problems. That's not what we do here. we use absolutely no technology to solve problems here.
We do not.
It's pure gut and intuition, and
Yes.
No
sledgehammers.
maybe a little bit of life experience along the way. But
A little bit.
what we're actually going to be talking about is letting it go. And there are people who have argued that I let it go a long time ago, but that's that's a whole different topic. Instead, we're going to talk about how owners probably ought to be letting go a little bit more when they're running their agency.
Or a lot more, for that matter.
Well, baby steps.
Yeah, okay, baby steps. I mean, I've had that experience, right, where I hire some really smart people, and I didn't have the experience either to let go, give up control, or put in the right process to be able to do it. And it cost me relationships, it cost me clients, it cost me a lot of money. And I notice this about myself the more mature I get, is that when I'm really, really busy and I'm stuck in the weeds, it's harder for me to let go. And so I have to take a step back and say to myself, like, this is the moment. You can either stay up all night and do this yourself, or you can rely on the really smart team that you have. And that's hard for me. I have to remind myself of that more often than I'd like to admit.
Well, I mean, and the problem is that when you don't let it go, you continue to make things worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yes.
so rather than making it better, which is what you instinctively think is going to happen when you roll up your sleeves and just help out, you're undercutting the confidence of your team. You're perhaps causing them to not invest as much the next time around, because they'll be like, well, Chip's going to edit this anyway.
Right. That's exactly right.
Why should I
That's
deliver
exactly right.
an A effort? I mean, all I need to do is get some words on the page, and then he can do whatever he's going to do to it.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And so you need to create that culture where people understand that you are going to trust them to do the job that you've hired them to do.
Oh, and it makes your life so much easier, because you think, like my big thing is I procrastinate so much that it gets to the point that if I ask somebody to do it, they're going to have to work, extra hours or over, into the evening or whatever to get it done. And so then I don't do it. So that's a big one for me. So I have to say to myself, okay, you can't procrastinate this. It has to get done. And you have to trust the team that they're going to do it. And it may take me a little extra time on the front end, but life is so much easier when you do that, because now, to your point, the team knows that you have the confidence in them, that you trust them, that they can do the best job that they can do. And you're going to be like, great, this is amazing. Let's continue forward. it may not be the way you want it done. It may not be the way you have done it, but that's okay. It's okay. I promise it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to ask yourself, is it good enough? And I'm not talking just kind of phone it in, just barely, you know, you can still do excellent work as an agency, even if it's not exactly the way that you would have done it. And you have to keep in mind that it's good enough in your mind. It might actually be better in the client's mind than whatever you would have done had you done it personally.
That's exactly right. And, you know, I think that's the thing is we have, I actually just wrote a blog post about this, but we have the curse of knowledge. So we have this bias, I guess I would call it, around the work that we do, that there's only one way to do it. And that's our way is the best way. And what you find when you trust those really smart people that you've hired to do their jobs, that sometimes their way is actually the best way. And the client is extremely happy and you didn't have to do anything. And, you know, I have always said, and I say this to my team all the time, when a client has decided that they are at a point they don't need us anymore because we've taught them everything that they can do to go on to the next level beyond what we do, that's the best situation to be in. It's not fun to lose a client, especially when you've been working with them for years to build something. But when they say to you, you have taught us so much, thank you. Now we're going to go on and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to go build I've had, you know, clients go build an internal customer service team to handle all the leads. Like I've had lots of different, not that they're hiring a different firm, but they're transferring that money to something else because they've been so successful doing the work that we have. And that's the best situation. It's not, but I relate that because it's the same kind of thing with your team. Like if you get to the point where you're like, oh, you've handled this and I don't have to worry about it, that is the best feeling in the world. The best.
And I think it's also important to understand that letting go as an agency owner isn't, it's not just about saving time, because in fact, sometimes you have to invest more time. It's really about giving up control. And so that means that sometimes you actually have to go the extra mile. And so we've talked about some examples here where you can let it go, let your team handle things. But that also means sometimes you need to involve your team in things. And I'm thinking in particular, when it comes to business development, owners like to put together proposals and pricing and not consult their team because they don't want to bother their team. It's
not billable work.
It's not billable work, you know, and I need to maintain these utilization rates for my team. And if I do this, I'm going to drive those down. And I was told I need to have 85% billable. And if I work with them on this, it's going to drive that. It's nuts. And you need to involve your team so that your proposal has the right solutions, the right timelines, and the right pricing, because now you know how much it's actually going to take to get it done. And you're not basing it off of your own estimates of what it would take you to do some of these things. Because the further you are removed from the day-to-day as your agency grows, the less accurate your estimates are going to be about timelines and amounts of time and all that. And so you're going to get pricing wrong, you get scope wrong, you set expectations wrong. It's all bad. So letting go is giving up control. It's not just saving yourself time.
Yeah. And there have been many times where I've said, oh, I can write a news release in 15 minutes and then put together a media list in a half an hour and then start pitching. And that is crazy because most people can't do that. I remember back in the day, a friend of mine said to me, how long does it take you to write a blog post? And I said, an hour. And he was like, wait, what? It only takes you an hour? And I was like, yeah. But it's just something. But that expectation of someone on my team to write a blog post in an hour is not accurate because they don't have the same expertise that I have. They don't have the same curse of knowledge. They don't have, like, for them to write the same article that I can write just because of my experience, they'd have to research, they'd have to do all those sorts of things. So involving your team to say, okay, if we're going to do a PACEL model program for this client and we're going to include social media ads and landing pages and pillar content and webinars, how much time is that going to take us? And then you start to work it backwards from that, because the time that's going to take you is significantly less just because you have the experience than your team does. And in some cases, they may be faster than you too. So you have to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, this is one of the reasons why hourly rates can vary as well, right? So, you know, one of the knocks on hourly rates is, it only takes me 30 minutes to do it. And, so we don't get paid enough if I charge by the hour. Well, but that's why if you can write a blog post or an op-ed in 30 minutes or 60 minutes, you would charge a higher hourly rate to account for that level of skill versus someone who might take 3 hours to do it.
Right.
And so you should still be getting fair value for it at the end of the day. And so, people lose track of those kinds of things, but you really need to be talking to the people who are doing the work. That's the only way that you get scope, timetable, and workload correct, so that you can actually be putting together proposals that can win business and produce the results that you say they can, not just for the client, but for you too.
Yeah. And I would also add to that it buys them into the process. So you have much higher success rate of them enjoying the client and enjoying the work if they were brought in the beginning and they were part of crafting the plan, versus you creating it and handing it to them and saying, okay, go do this. They're not bought in at the same level. In some cases, they may not be bought in at all. So having them involved in the beginning of the process is extraordinarily important just for that buy-in.
Well, and that buy-in helps in a number of different ways. I mean, it certainly typically helps you produce a better proposal. It will help you from the perspective of they're now doing work that they've helped you frame. So they do have that buy-in, which hopefully means it will be better work. The other thing, frankly, though, is it makes it easier for you to press them to stick to the timelines and scopes. Yeah. Because you can say, you helped me create this. Right? So they can't say, well, if you had asked me, because, I mean, how many times have I talked to a team member over the years who said, well, if you had talked to me first, if you had consulted with me, I never said we could do that. Those kinds of things. If you actually engage them, it takes that off of the table. Right.
You did say.
And so that can help as well. Hopefully it doesn't even come to that because they were involved. But if it does, it takes that little bit of ammunition they might have away. And then you can have a meaningful discussion. Why is this timeline being pushed? Why is it taking more time than we thought? And look, we all get estimates wrong. We'll get them wrong if we're the ones doing the work all on our lonesome. Right. Things come up, things happen. You hit an unexpected snag. I was doing some work myself last week, and I hit just a ridiculous snag that shouldn't have been there, and it turned what should have been an hour-long project into like an 8-hour project.
Oh,
it happens. No. It happens. It's frustrating as all get out. But, those are the kinds of things that happen. So you can't just, explode when someone doesn't hit those timelines. But if they're involved in it, your likelihood that it's accurate is going to be much higher than if you're making your own predictions based on what you did 5 or 10 years ago when you were just like them.
Yeah, I think, letting it go, giving up control, trusting your team to do the best job that they can do. And listen, there are plenty of situations for me right now where I close my eyes and I go, it's okay. It's not to your level, but we're still getting engagement. We're still getting click-throughs. People are still going through the funnel. It's okay. And I literally have to have that conversation with myself, because otherwise I would be micromanaging the process, and then my writer would get upset and she would leave. And I don't want her to leave because she's very good. So I have to do that too. I have to self-talk myself all the time. And I do it all the time in giving up control.
Well, and it can hurt your relationships with clients as well.
For sure.
And not just because you're producing the wrong results. If you're not letting go, clients pick up on that.
Yeah.
And clients will notice that in a call with them, in a meeting with them, that you're stomping all over your team and you're the one who's answering questions. Or worse, you're undercutting them openly, where they say something and you correct them in front of the client, oftentimes completely unnecessarily. Sometimes it may not be needed at all. Sometimes it could be done after the meeting and doesn't need to be done in front of the client. And so you start doing those things, and the client just starts to think to themselves one of two things. Either, well, I only want to work with Ginny because she's the only one who has the answers.
Right.
And that's not good. Or they start thinking, these folks are just a bunch of clowns. Why are we working with them at all?
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. I keep a notebook of things for that very reason, and I write things down, and when we're in a meeting, and then at the end of the meeting, after we've left and we're either off Zoom or out of the room, I go through that list and I decide if there are things on there that need to be discussed, or if I can just let it go. And most of the time, after I've gotten out of the meeting and calmed myself down a little bit, most of the time it's stuff I can just let go, and there's no reason for follow-up. But, you know, I've made all those mistakes. I've made them all. All of them.
Yep. Same here.
All of them. And I'm sure that every person listening to this has made these mistakes and may still be making them. Like I said, I have to self-talk myself all the time. All the time.
And the worst part is we've all seen our own bosses in our early careers.
Right.
The same thing to us.
To us.
And yet we keep repeating the same behavior.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And you really do have to make an effort to break out of this, because it creates more problems than it solves. And your idea of make some notes in the meeting and then decide afterwards what really needs to be raised, you should also be doing that for things that are sent to you for your approval before it goes to a client. If you're getting a design, a blog post, whatever it is, and you have to review it before it goes on to the client, be really picky about the things that you're choosing to edit or provide feedback on, and ask yourself, does it really change the impact of this? Is it something that the client will have a serious objection to, or are you just making it more the way you
want it? Right.
And so even within that, there are lines, right? You can say, hey, in the future, I might do it this way. For this, it's fine, but in the future, right? And so you can really modulate the feedback that you're providing to your team so that they continue to have confidence that you are demonstrating that you can let it go, but you're still helping to coach and mentor them into being better players on your team in the future.
Yeah, my favorite thing to say when somebody says, do you need to look at this before it goes to the client? My favorite thing to say is, nope, I trust you. And people love that. People are like, oh, okay. So I will say, hey, I know we're doing a big piece on X, and I'd really like to just give it a glance over if I want to see something. And occasionally they'll say, do you want to see this? Do you want to see that? And I love to say, nope, you're good, and let them go on their way. But it's been very challenging for me. That has been a really hard thing for me to do, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, one variation that I would typically use with team members is, instead of saying, no, I trust you, I would say, is there something that you want me to look at?
Yeah.
Right? So, because, you know, sometimes a team member wants you to weigh in on something. And so I like to give them that option to say, hey,
fair,
you know, and so that's one of the tweaks that I made over the years, because I started out when I started being more cognizant of this, I started with the, no, I trust you, but then I would come to learn that there were some team members who wanted something to have another pair of eyes on it, or they had something in particular that they were like, you know, I'm not sure about how I framed this or that. And so, you know, what I shifted to was, is there something that I should be looking at? Is there something that I should be considering?
I like that.
You know,
I like that.
And so, you know, try to get them to be thoughtful about the process so that you're still putting them in control, but they also still understand that you are a resource for them if they need it, and they shouldn't be afraid to take advantage of it, because that's one of the challenges with letting go, right? You need to let go in such a way that they're not afraid to come to you if they do need help,
right.
If they do need your input, guidance, intervention, something.
I had a boss really, really early on who, when I would turn something in, she'd say, tell me why this is the best thing you've ever written. And the first couple of times I was like, I don't know. But it trained me, A, to turn in the best thing I've ever written, and B, be prepared to stand up for why I had written what I had written. And what I learned from that is that a client was going to say, oh, why did you take this approach? Or what did you do here? Why did you do it? And I was able to then, what she was training me to do is be able to stand up to the client and say, this is why we did it, right? And I always thought that was really interesting. But those first few times she asked me, I was like, and if I couldn't answer it, and she did this with everybody, if they couldn't answer it and tell her why it was the best thing they'd ever written, she'd send you back to your desk. Go back, come back when you think it's the best thing you've ever written. But it taught me to stand up for what I had created, stand up to the client when I was questioned, be willing to stand up for the piece and for the work that we were doing, and also have the confidence to do it. So I don't necessarily know that that's the right phrase to use. I wouldn't use that phrase.
No, I think that's fraught. Particularly if you have someone on your team who's perhaps a perfectionist.
For sure. I literally would be like,
where they may never turn a piece into you ever. And of course, the truthful answer to that question more often than not is hell no. Right? I mean, it's not like every piece you write is going to be the best piece you've ever written. It's the best in the moment for what I've been asked to do. Sure, I can agree with that. But I mean, every time I'm asked to write something for a client over the course of my career, am I going to claim it's the best thing I've ever written? I personally am not, but
No, I mean, I would not use that phrase, but
the idea behind it is a very good one, because you do want your team to be able to stand up to the client and explain why they've done something, and not because it is a challenge. A lot of more junior team members have a very difficult time with clients, and they immediately fold as soon as they meet any resistance from the client.
Correct.
And so you need to have confidence in the approach that you're recommending, whether it's the words on the page or the strategy or the tactics or whatever. And if you don't, the client may not even be inclined to disagree with you, but if you show weakness, they may start wondering, well, wait a minute, this person's not really confident in what they're presenting to me. Is it the right thing? So those are things that, in order for you to let go successfully, you need to help your team improve their skills in these areas. So instead of micromanaging the specifics of what they're doing, think about how they're doing it and how you can help them to do it better in general, not on that specific task by micromanaging them.
Let it go. Let it go.
Okay. There we go. There's our copyright. We're going to lose like the $1 million an episode that YouTube pays us. Every time. No.
Yeah, no. Doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. All right. Well, we are going to let it go, and we're going to let this episode go and let you go back to your day, because we don't want to micromanage your day. So
no, we do not.
We do not.
Give up.
But we do appreciate you listening, and we will instruct you to come back here again next week with the asterisk, the weeks we publish. when Jenny doesn't go to decide that she's just too important to record that episode.
That's not true. I was on my deathbed. All my deathbed.
Anyway. All right. With that, I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Gini Dietrich.
And it depends.